So good evening. We're a string quartet formed with members of the Palm Beach Symphony, and we're very excited to be here at the Norton Sculpture Garden. And we would like to be playing some music, obviously, but throughout the concert, I'm going to try to make a few connections between our music and the art that's surrounding us. First, just a few comments about art and music in general. Of course, art as a whole is a human experiment. It's a human expression. It's a form of human expression. We want to express our feelings. We want to express our relationship with nature. We want to find ways of expressing through skill, of course, all of the different sensations that a human being can go through in their life experiences. And for that, each type of form, each type of art will use certain elements that are actually common to all of them. So for example, if we talk about music, of course we are in a dimension of sound. So the elements of music are going to be pitch, or the different notes that we use. But as we combine these notes, we are able to form melodies. And melodies are equivalent to line in the visual arts. And depending on how we organize those notes in time, we create the sense of rhythm and the sense of beat. And you see that, especially in architecture, through repetition. If we look at these columns, there is a certain rhythm to it. And if we look at a lot of this art, they display a great deal of rhythm. Of course, there's the dimension of color. The element of color is very much a part of music as well as our visual arts. By changing instruments, it's most obvious in a symphony when you listen to the oboes and then you listen to the strings, completely different color of sound. But as you're going to hear tonight, even within the string quartet, we're able to produce a number of colors and textures, and we'll connect that to some of the art out there. Our first piece is the first movement from the Quartet Opus 18 number 2 by Beethoven. And of course, Beethoven was a giant in music history. And for that, I've selected the foot that's right behind you by Tom Otterness. It's a little bit whimsical. It's perhaps a little cartoonish. And this quartet is a little bit like that. Beethoven was always upset by aristocracy and their pompousness. And in this piece, he kind of mocks the aristocracy. You're going to hear there is some exaggerated properness in the music. It's very, very elegant. And every once in a while, it gets a little too intellectual, and you're going to hear the cello interrupts the whole intellectual discussion, and we get back to the beautiful melody. So please enjoy the first movement from Quartet Opus 18 number 2 by Beethoven. And now we would like to invite you for a short experiment. I was asking myself about that, comparing the arts and the different dimensions. And I began to wonder, what would happen if we looked at music the same way that we look at art? So I picked something that I know you're all familiar with, and let's take a quick tour of what can happen. So here is the normal version, the way it's normally viewed. You're familiar with that, right? Now, what happened if you decided to step back and get some distance, to get a bigger picture? So everything is just a little more fuzzy, a little more connected, and of course, much smaller. So that was nice, but then you want to get a really close look. Now, what if you looked at it from the left? So you're going to see a lot from that side, maybe not so much on this side. Now let's look at it from the other side, from the right. Or perhaps you want to admire and your eye gets caught in one fixed spot. Or maybe you're interested in a special color that you found somewhere. Or maybe you just want to follow the contours of the line. Or maybe you got tired of looking at it and you decide to turn it upside down. So that was just an experiment. I was curious to see what would happen. Well, of course, we don't look at art that way. And with the next piece, we're going to listen to the first movement of Quartet by Maurice Ravel, who was a French composer, and he's often associated with Impressionistic movement. We've now just moved about 100 years in the history of music, and the aesthetic for music is quite different. What Ravel was looking for in this piece, there was a focus on looking for colors and textures, not so much about the structure, even though he follows a very traditional structure in the way this movement is put together. But we see a desire to look for the sensuality of sound. So you're going to hear different sonorities coming from the instruments, almost experimental. He's not quite experimental, but they're tremolandi and sudden changes of sound. And there's a sensuality to the piece, and also a certain simplicity. So for that, I wanted to point out the Fernand Léger sculpture called Sunflower. And it's got a certain simplicity to it, but the main focus of the Sunflower is the colors. So you're going to hear this interesting colors. And also the moonrise that's behind us too, in the sense that we're looking for the sensuality, just the color and the texture of that sculpture. So here's the first movement from Ravel's String Quartet. So instrumental music, like a lot of the art here in the garden, is clearly abstract. We have no words. And so even though we might be trying to express something, it's very abstract. It's all in the listener, in the ears of the listener, exactly what it is that we're trying to say. And more often than not, there is no right answer as to exactly what is being said. But every once in a while, composers do try to get very, very specific. And that's the case here with Shostakovich. Shostakovich was a Russian composer who lived during the Soviet era. And during a time of great oppression, he witnessed many of his colleagues, artists, intellectuals disappearing all around him. And he spent most of his life in great fear of hearing the knock, knock, knock on the door from the KGB as he imagined, be escorted away to disappear. So he was a very troubled man, and when he sat down to write his 8th string quartet, which is what we're going to hear now, it's quite possible that he was considering suicide. He wrote a note saying that, "I know that when I die, nobody's going to write anything to honor my life, so I decided to do it myself." So the 8th quartet is pretty much autobiographical. And we're going to play for you the 3rd movement, which reminded me very much of one of the pieces that's here in the garden called Danse Macabre, or the Dance of Death. And it really depicts a bunch of bones, and there's a certain rhythmic activity going on, even though they're not moving. Just from the shapes, you can kind of delineate the rhythm. And in this Scherzo that Shostakovich wrote for this quartet, you're going to hear a waltz. But it's a very strange waltz. And I thought it would be very fitting to go with that particular sculpture. So here's the Scherzo from Shostakovich's Quartet number 8. To close this concert, we're going to play the first movement from the second quartet by Felix Mendelssohn, Opus 13. Now, Mendelssohn was a child prodigy. He started composing at a very, very young age. When he wrote this quartet, he was 18 years old. But the thing to realize is that by this age, he had already written a ton of music, several symphonies, a number of chamber music works and pieces for orchestra. So he was a very, very colorful man, and he wrote terrific music. And this particular piece, I wanted to connect it to some of the pieces around here, like Keith Haring Julia, that has very clear shapes, but it has a lot of rhythm, a lot of flow, a lot of movement. It depicts a ballet dancer. We also have pieces like George Rickey that are 6 random lines. And that's kind of a minimalist piece, but it also has this feeling of flow. And finally, there's Shapiro's Up and Over, which is kind of a stick figure that you can see from many different directions. But the point is, all these pieces of art invoke the idea of flow. And Mendelssohn musics tend to be extremely flowing. And this particular piece is extra passionate because we see here an 18-year-old who was in love. He was eyeing this young lady whom he liked very much. They used to play together, and they had this little song that they would sing. It was kind of an inside joke. And he used that little song as a major part of this quartet. It starts with a slow introduction, and then the viola is going to usher into this tumultuous, passionate movement to evoke the heart of a young man in love. So enjoy Mendelssohn Quartet, Opus 13, first movement.